Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's meeting. Sorry, a few microphone issues. Do I have any apologies for absence?
None, Chair.
Okay, great. Thank you, Stephanie. So we'll move to the record of the meeting. Do members agree to the record of the meeting held on the 31st of May? Great, thank you very much. There are no urgent matters. Do you have any declarations of interest? Councillor Prenter?
I'm still a member of the ASLEF Trade Union.
Councillor Van Dyke?
And still a Unite member and a pensioner from Unison.
Councillor Meyer?
GMB member.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move on to agenda item 5, and that's the review of MedPay, and I'll ask Sam to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. Committee, you remember back in January 2020, you commissioned an independent review into our current MedPay system, in which is our pay structure in terms of rewarding staff and uplifting against pay and performance. Unfortunately, shortly after that, we went into the pandemic, and the rationale for the pay review has shifted significantly. We're also now presented with greater recruitment and retention issues, not least because of the pandemic, but also because we're a few years further on. The paper in front of you sets out a proposal to ask us not to independently review what's wrong with our current system, but to acknowledge the stuff that we've managed to uncover ourselves. In 3.2 within the report, you will find a list of examples as to why our current pay approach needs to be reviewed. These are quite excessive, and I don't intend to go through all of those, but the one thing I did want to point out is the inconsistency that we have at the moment. So where we've had the lack of ability to move through our pay bands, it has meant that we've made inconsistent judgments and inconsistent approaches to some of our pay salaries. And what we've rewarded people during that period. Now that has created some smoothing across the organisation, but what that does present us with is a significant challenge across job families. So where we've got a graded system, one for all, it doesn't fit for every profession that we've got. There's other areas within that list that also highlight some of the other key challenges that we have. Now, the potential option that we want to look at is not just a pay review. We don't want to uplift everybody's salary. That won't serve us well for the future and will neither protect us from the position we find ourselves in at the moment. The key thing about this pay review is to allow progression through the band and value the skills and experience that individuals are bringing to Medway Council. So we want to put in place a progressional framework which will allow people to choose if they want to progress along the framework against their chosen profession. At the moment, within our competencies, we have one competency skill set that fits everything, and what you'd find we might need across a competence within HR might be slightly different to that within legal. So we do need to look at the professions and make sure that progressional framework is aligned to what is needed within that professional area in order to deliver our services. We are aware that there are some issues around equal pay claims. We have looked at pay across Medway Council and made sure that that is no longer a significant risk. However, if we do nothing, it does present itself as a risk. The other area we want to look at is market allowance. So we know that any given time the market can change, it can fluctuate, it can go down. There could be something that happens within the economy that allows there to be a higher rate of pay given. We currently don't have the mechanisms or the structure to do that across the board, only in that of individuals where we offer a market premium. So what we want to put in place is an allowance that is aligned to the market that will be for just those set areas for a period of time. And should we find that that area doesn't decrease and it remains high, then we would instigate a whole review of that job family rather than let it remain static and become part of the pay package. One of the main principles for this is cost, and we don't anticipate this won't be without cost. But one of the key things we need to do is we need to benchmark against others. Currently within MedPay, we benchmark internally against our own evaluation system, and at best we might look at the market and the live roles that are out there, but that doesn't give us a systematic approach to how professions might be moving, what might be happening. So the Transformation Board has granted us some additional funding to look at bringing in a market data system, which will help us do this and be consistent in our approach as we re-evaluate all of the roles. It's also noted that this is quite a significant project and it's not something that we can do immediately, and it's not a quick fix that will happen overnight. We therefore need to engage some more resource in order to do this, because there will be a huge burden upon services because they are the experts within their professional area. So we need to make sure we're supporting service managers in the delivery through this. And again, Transformation Board have supported this, acknowledging that this is a massive task in terms of our transformation journey moving forward. In terms of the recommendations, therefore, then for this committee, One is to ask that the independent review is not taken forward, and the list that's been provided within the paper and the discussion we will have today will provide you with the confidence to know that Medway completely understand the limitations of the current approach, and therefore we'd like to move forward with the new pay proposal. Agree the principles and the framework that's been set out within this new approach, appreciating that at the moment the detail is absent, but as I mentioned before at our previous meeting, we will look to roll this out on a 10% cohort of the organisation where we'll be able to share and design those details collectively. And then note other content within this report and provide any further comment. Now I appreciate there's a lot to take in there, so I'm more than happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam. Councillor Moore?
Thank you. And I think much of that was also covered in the previous meeting, but just to go over some of it. I think first, I'm coming at this with a sort of a principle of any sort of change is likely going to be good, given I think MedPay needs to sort of improve. So I think we all welcome the review. Regarding the dropping the independent sort of review, was that in your view not needed? Or do you think, or was it a case of not enough time or resource? Just want to know which one you think, or a combination of both. It was covered a bit before in the previous meeting, but just to go over it just really briefly, is there a risk that we will be applying sort of a market premium to certain positions like tech positions, for example, which might command a higher salary from outside local government? Is there a risk of a two-tier system, and are there any risks to that from that? I'm glad to hear this isn't a salary benchmarking exercise. Of course, that's something separate and would be considered outside of this item. But is there any indication, given that if you're applying a new system, there has to be some kind of effects on sort of people's pay, because things will be reviewed, they will be changed. Is there any indication that any of this will lead to anyone losing their job, or jobs or sectors, or any cuts in particular, or any changes that can be sort of seen just by doing a desktop exercise, I suppose? Is it clear at all? And if so, where? I will leave it there because I think I've asked a fair few questions there.
Thank you, Councillor Mayhill. So in terms of the independent review, I genuinely believe there's not a need to do an independent review. I think everything that we've identified within HR, and particularly where I've been in for a longer period of time now, has kind of flushed out all of the concerns. And the original paper that was presented to corporate management team gave a lot more evidence behind some of those bulleted items that you have here today to demonstrate that this isn't an assumption. We actually have the evidence to support the fact. And I genuinely don't think an independent review would be able to come in and tell us anything else that's wrong with the system. I think we've got quite a few things that we've identified and want to fix. And, you know, whilst there isn't an independent review to tell us what we need to do, we might want to consider independent review further down the line once we've implemented at a point to test what we've done. And I would probably, if I had a choice, would be more welcome to that rather than somebody telling me what I perhaps and hope already know. And as the head of HR, you know, I absolutely would feel quite foolish if there was something going on that I wasn't aware of, in all honesty. And also the independent part of it, you know, when this was commissioned back in 2020, I'd only recently joined the council as an independent person, so wasn't part of the original design, and have had to learn as I go. So that has been, in a way, fresh eyes on a product that has been able to give some demonstration to perhaps how it doesn't work. And my team are experts. They've been at it a while, they've tried to fix things, and the team generally know the issues. So I think personally, I think it would be a waste of money at this stage in this, and that's not necessarily time dependent. It's just the need that I think we've identified the issues that we've got. In terms of the risk around the market premium or the allowance that we're going to apply in there potentially being a two-tier system, absolutely not. The one thing we don't want to create is a two-tier system. One of the things that the current system has in place for us at the moment is we might pay higher rates to attract, and then we've got a smooth of existing staff. That doesn't always happen immediately, which if you've been a long-standing member of staff and you haven't been recognised and that hasn't happened for you, then you're more likely to leave when you see people coming in on higher rates of pay. So one of the things we've got to be absolutely careful about is if we're applying that market premium, it applies to that job family, not that one individual or the person who's a flight risk or that new person that's just come in. And in terms of people's impact and people's pay, one of the things this pay review is not looking to do is cut jobs. And what we're not looking to do is take pay away from people. Now, this does go alongside a transformation journey. So as an organisation, we're on a significant transformation journey around automation. And those areas that are part of that know what that means in terms of if things are going to be automated. That might mean that we're not doing the admin function we were doing before. Now, that again doesn't necessarily mean job cuts. It might mean we do things differently and there's more things we can do. So each service area will be different on its transformation journey, but this pay review will not be dependent upon that. It's almost two separate things that will allow us to attract the skills we need, do things differently, but of course with everything that we're going to do, we're going to look for transformational change because we have got that journey to go through.
So one of the thoughts I had when reading it was, at what point is it easier for us to sort of either go back to NJC, or is this a case of we're working towards it, or is it a situation where actually that is wronging-headed because this does something that NJC doesn't do? I just want to know sort of what your views are on that, only because if what we're doing is applying a lot of benchmarking, and it does seem to be designed through it, especially with the market allowance framework and other mechanisms, if we are benchmarking, at what point, aren't we just benchmarking across to the NJC anyway, because that's what they're providing, and so we're just benchmarking that number? Why don't we just follow that if the majority of local government employees are on that sort of reward scheme? And then I believe in the other meeting, sorry to reference back to that, there was a mention of a forecast of sorts. And is there any sort of indication of what might be available percentage-wise to accommodate what I'd imagine this would need a lot more in terms of, we'd have to find more money, right? Because it could only go up if we're going to be putting market valuation. Is there an indication of how much that might be? And if it is then getting close to the difference between what MedPay is now and NJC is currently, which I think is probably about 8 or 10% difference, I think, isn't it just a case, couldn't we just be better off to say, well, let's just switch back to NJC? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mayhill. So is it easier to go back to NJC? Absolutely. If I'm being honest, that's an easy route for us just to switch back. Should we do it? Personally, I think no. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is NJC offers annual incremental pay uplift. Now, for me, that doesn't necessarily grow progression or allow progression for a professional framework. So even if we were to go back to NJC and we wanted to put in professional frameworks, we would still have to do all this work in order to align that to the NJC ratings, and people just get that automatic uplift. And that performance management of that annual uplift becomes much more difficult to do. What we're trying to do and what's different about this is it's not an automatic uplift. So there will be points within the pay band that people can aspire to get to because they can clearly see what the skills and experiences that they need to bring to that. And by doing this, I'm hoping that will drive much better conversations around performance development for individuals and making sure that people have better career pathways in place. The other thing about NJC is we have taken a sample amount of sizes, if you like, against NJC in our current pay performance, and the percentage does vary depending on what band it is and what profession it is, and we have made some inroads into areas locally, so we haven't just always stuck on the med pay. So if we've had to increase a salary banding by a percentage, we've had to do that, and we have done that, in particularly our statutory service areas where we must recruit and we must deliver. So NJC is easier, but I don't think it will deliver what we need it to do around our workforce plan and growing our own and developing that talent pipeline that will come through, because this progressional framework is not something we can just take from NJC. All NJC will give us is a number of incremental points to move people, and this review isn't about just moving people through the band, it's about actually developing people and giving people careers here at Medway, and that is unique to Medway rather than nationally.
So a third thing, actually this does something different.
Yes, yeah. And on your point around the forecast, so you'll know we're coming up to a time where we're looking at our outlook now, around our medium-term financial outlook. We're waiting, obviously, on what that means in terms of central government and what's happening. So we've done some broad forecasting. We've looked at other pay reviews and average costs of pay reviews and what it's done. We've looked at what it costs in terms of when this council in particular has gone for a pay review before. So we do have some ballpark figures. Until we get that benchmark system in, we've got to test it. The medium-term financial outlook and what that means in terms of supporting this pay review. So it has been acknowledged that, you know, there could be considerable cost in some areas. We are looking at other areas of opportunity. So in some areas we become really reliant on locum spend. And that is really huge in terms of what we've got. And often that could be because we're not paying the right salaries to attract. So we are looking at, is there an opportunity to recycle some of that spend back into the pots rather than have it as a pressure. So we've got a number of options across a number of teams around how we manage that pressure across the budget. And as I mentioned before, some of that might be through transformational opportunities to do things different and create greater services. Thank you.
Great. Councillor Printer?
Yeah, thank you. I understand you're saying your reasoning for not doing the independent review, and you feel with the skills you've got and the professional you are that you've literally, in a sense, done it yourself. I think the reason that an independent review was asked and many employees would have brought into it was that it was independent, because MedPay, which isn't trusted, isn't liked by the employees of Medway Council, would have been sold MedPay as the saviour of all many years ago, designed by someone in a position very much like your own. So how do we convince the employees that this is different, that this is fairer, and this won't be 5-10 years' time us reviewing this because it's not working or perceived to not work?
Thank you, Councillor Prentis. Yeah, I appreciate your points, and they're great points. I mentioned in the previous meeting, my biggest concern on this is trust from the organisation, because of previous pay reviews and because of just naturally the element of you thinking there's going to be pay cuts and this is going to come at a cost to the service as opposed to us funding the money. Now, in terms of making this different, we've got to create a lot more communication with our workforce. We've got to, you know, really explain to them that there's opportunity here, which we didn't have in the previous element pay of it. Now, for me, it's key that we work with our union colleagues around that engagement, because I think that's absolutely crucial. We spoke briefly about the meeting that we got on Tuesday, where we're going to look at where that means in terms of collective agreements. By doing the pilot phase of 10% rather than putting the whole organisation through it, we wouldn't be at a point where we're trying to change terms and conditions and end contracts. And I'm hoping that will instill some confidence into the organisation that we're being really transparent about what we're doing. The organisation is helping to design this, and we would have tested those products as we go. Now, that 10% will be a voluntary opportunity for people to come on board. We're not going to force people to go into it. And that might mean we have to dual roll with two systems, and we do appreciate that, and we've got that as a risk. But I genuinely do believe if we can articulate this in the right way, the issue that we will be faced with from the organisation is the fact that it's not automatic annual uplift. And I think that's going to be the biggest concern for most people because of NJC. So it's how we present that in a better way to offer something more around that career progression and the opportunity for people to be able to be properly managed through that succession and talent mapping process. One of the things we do at the moment, we do an annual review in March. We look at the objectives, we look at the competence of individuals, and we rate them across a 1, 2 and 3, if you like. Not much happens beyond that. So where are our superstars? How are we developing those? Where are the people that we're bringing in the early talent? And how do they know they've got a career here at Medway? How do we make it really visual for them? And, you know, I want to be in a position whereby whether you're attracted to Medway or you're an employee at Medway, you can almost log onto your professional area page, look at what it means and what you've got to do to move through that, and have the support there that will enable you to do just that. At the moment, it's individual conversations, and if we move back to NJC and that's all we've done, we wouldn't change much other than people getting an incremental uplift. And I feel quite passionate about the workforce strategy planning in this, and giving people that opportunity to develop. And I think that is the key thing, and that's the point that we really need to sell to people as the thing that's going to be different and gain the trust through the pilot of the 10%.
Yeah, thanks for that. You're doing this sample of 10%. If we'd done the independent review that was asked by this very committee, but the results of that independent review would have, I assume, would have come back to this committee and we would have seen the report on that. Will there be a report and the data from this 10% that you're doing first, would that be coming to this committee to just prove to us that it is working?
I would recommend it does, yeah. So I think as we've taken this approach in terms of socialising what we're trying to achieve through this pay approach, in terms of those particular milestones that we're going to be crossing, I think we've got to go back through and report back to those people as well, and that's yourself here at EMC.
Councillor Prentice, we'll try and build that into recommendations. Yeah, Councillor Van Dijk?
Just wanted to ask how you're determining who will be included within the pilot scheme.
Yeah, so that hasn't been easy to achieve given the pressures that we've got across a number of areas within the local authority at the moment. But most definitely we've focused it mainly on the principles of recruitment and retention issues. So where we notice we're losing a lot of people, and particularly where exit surveys are suggesting it's largely pay related, and where we're going out to market and we've had a number of failed campaigns, and where we're carrying high locums, we've kind of pulled a priority list, if you like, into order around that impact, and we've had to take those lists. Now, it's no good just using that list without the commitment from the service area, because as I mentioned in the previous meeting, there's a huge ask on the service to put themselves through this and be wanting to do it, and I mentioned the volunteering point. So our next point will be going out to those services across the priority list to see who's in a position to come on board. Now, some of those will be much easier to achieve because there might already be a professional framework that they work to, others might need more work. So I do think the 10% won't be a quick start and finish, and most definitely in some of the areas we've identified, we have acknowledged if we start with one team, actually that team becomes quite large because there's a number of other teams that will be associated. So even though, as an example, we might have approached payroll in my team as being part of the 10%, I'm not committing that they are in it, but I'm just giving you an example, there will be a knock-on effect to the rest of the team. So at what point do they come into the timeline? So we've tried to look at the job families to almost time script out when we can bring it on, because I think one of the other biggest risks is, what if you're not in that 10%? How do we keep you engaged? How do we retain you? Because your salary is not being looked at and your career development isn't being looked at this time. So we've got to give some hope to the rest of that team around trusting the pilot and visibility of that pilot, but also knowing what that means for them at what point. So we're not disregarding anybody outside of that 10%, and to be honest, that 10% is larger than 10. We are looking at how we keep that communication going with others as well.
So, sorry, just supplementary to that, will that be across a broad wage range or focused on particular groups?
So that is across a wide range of areas, and one of the things we've tried to do, and we wanted to do it by fault of choosing really, but actually organically it's fallen within this way, is to make sure that in each area, each different profession, there is a sample size that we're working with within those directorates, because I think it's really important not just to focus on perhaps children's services or legal, because those are the ones that we're having the difficulty with, but to get a broader spectrum in. So again, not making commitments to who might be in and who might be out, but if we've got a particular area that as all of a sudden we've looked at the demographics of the workforce, and we know within the next 5 years a number of people are going to retire, and we haven't been able to attract people in on an early entry point, we've got a significant risk to our business further down the line. So should they be accelerated into? So as well as the principles around recruitment and retention, we've tried to forecast into the future around the demographics of that workforce and whether or not we've got significant risks to the service, because we won't retain that talent beyond a period of time, and we can't afford to wait, and we've got to do something now. So there's a number of supplementary areas, if you like, against the recruitment and retention that we've applied to some of those areas. They still have to be tested with the services. So this is from data of what we know in the HR team across the recruitment side, with involvement with the assistant directors from what they realise is the areas, and also some of the feedback from service managers. But we've got to go out now and test that list to get that definitive 10% confirmed.
Thank you. Councillor Martin?
Yeah, my question was answered there. Thank you.
Okay, great. Any other member? No? Okay, great. So happy to move recommendations then on page 18, set out in 13.1, but with the addition of an update of progress. Probably January meeting's too soon, isn't it? So probably the April meeting, would that be fair? Okay, is that agreed? Okay. Yeah, so we'll move on to agenda item 6, the employee value proposition, and ask Sam to introduce a report, please.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, in a way, this report builds on from the discussion we've been having around the med pay. It's not just about salary, but it's about the benefits that are available to individuals as well. And, you know, at this committee previously, particularly around the pay negotiations, we've had conversations around what other benefits can we provide for people, what would make it attractive in terms of Medway as a place to work. So one of the things the team have been working on is our employee value proposition, because whilst we do have a number of things already in flight, we don't necessarily use that aggressively within our attraction strategy, and also within our induction into the organisation. Whilst it is there in an induction pack, how do we make sure people really understand what's available to them, and how do we support them? Now, this is a first draft, if you like, which you'll find in Annex 1, which kind of gives you a pictorial element of our values as an organisation, because we want to attract people that share our values. The likelihood of people coming in who are the same as us around our values is more likely that they will stay and be with us. And then we've put that into segments really around why does Medway become a place of attraction? Why would you want to come and work at Medway? Now, all of these areas are things that we're either already doing, we're in the midst of reviewing, or things that we know we need to do more on. So this is an initial rough draft. And in the previous meeting, I mentioned that we've got our staff survey going out on Monday, which will be out for a month. And we're really going to be testing people's understanding and knowledge of the benefits, but also asking what else they would like to see from us as an employer, what more we can do. But part of getting it right around our attraction of our salaries and our career progression is also to have that attraction strategy that goes alongside it, so that as a brand, as Medway, as a local council, people do want to come and work here. So how do we get that message out wider, and how do we make it part of that? So what this employee value proposition tries to do is create a people promise. So here at Medway, we are doing these things. Would you like to become part of it? Now, there is further work we would like to do around this in terms of linking it back into the review we're doing around pay. So as our people promise to you, this is what we're looking at and this is what we'll do. But in return, we want this. And that links back into core behaviours of what we'd like to see from people who come to work here. So culturally, we've got quite a bit of work to do, and we see this just as a first point of that kind of whole engagement piece with people. So I won't go through the paper in any more detail. However, I will say that there's been quite a bit of engagement work already taking place within the council, working with managers and working with individuals, particularly through the Medway makers, to try and ask people what attracted them initially to Medway, and since they've been here, what have they found out about what we do and what can we do more of? And equally, what didn't you know about, because we're not telling you at the start. So that's really important that as part of our attraction strategy, we make sure that we're letting everybody know what we have on offer. So really this report is a matter for comment from the committee today, for me to take back and build it into our further work that we're doing around our employee engagement and particularly our attraction strategy. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Sam. Any member? Councillor Thorne?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a quick one. I think the Our People Promise is a great way forward. You mentioned about the survey going out on Monday to all the employers. If I remember rightly, please don't quote me, but I don't think we had that much of a good response coming back from the last survey. How many people employees are you actually looking to survey this time? And I know it's a up in the air thing, but do you think the actual response will be percentage-wise, or have you got an idea what it'll be?
Thank you, Councillor Vaughan. You won't hold me to it if I say a figure, right? I'm just checking. I mean, within the temperature check surveys that we've done within the pandemic, actually the response rates were really high, but given what was going on, we were asking pertinent questions around how people were working, their well-being. What we tried to do with this annual survey, which typically before the pandemic would go out every year, is almost change some of those questions to make them more meaningful, and we've done that through consultation, again through Medway makers. So we're hoping that the attraction to this strategy is what people want to tell us. So again, we've changed slightly how we approach that. I can't remember the feedback from the last annual survey. I want to say it was around 60%. I don't know if Nicola recalls.
It was better than previous years.
Okay, so it was better than previous years, and we will build on that. So, I mean, typically, you know, this will go out to everybody. We have worked with comms around not just sending out on email, because we appreciate some of our staff don't necessarily work at laptops. Okay, so how do we make sure we've got opportunity for people if they can't get access to it online? How can we do it in paper format? Is there other ways of doing it? And we've really engaged our Medway Makers group this year. So we've got Medway Makers, which is a representative engagement from each area area of the business, and we really champion those because they've been part of the design, they've been part of it, and really, you know, pushing managers to allow people time to complete it. And I think that's really key. Now, in some areas, we've done things like you said we did, because I think one of the key things is, what's the point in me filling it in? What will happen with it? What are you going to do with it? So, you know, there's a lot of myth busting around, you know, how we're going to use it and what that's going to be like. And we've got quite a robust communications planning after it, because again, one of the things we probably haven't done before is get the results out quick enough. So we've done a lot of automation around how the results can be collated, how it can go down to directorate level, and we've got quite an aggressive plan of directors actually putting plans in place to put action plans against the findings to make sure we're doing it right. So if we can give some commitment to people that, you know, results will come of this and we will be making changes, and this is their chance to have a say on some really fundamental key things. And one of the key points being, you know, I mentioned mental health, but there's also wellness around finance. Okay, and that is a pressure point for everybody at the moment. So whilst we are signposting people, we're really quite concerned around the welfare of people. So in terms of me predicting a rate, I'm hoping it's near 70%, if I'm being honest, but I would be pleased with anything over 65.
Great. Councillor Prenter?
Yeah, just more of a comment really than a question. I actually sympathise with the council because it is quite hard, especially from a recruitment point of view, to say what else you're going to get than working for the council other than being good to the local community. If you work for a supermarket, you know you're going to get money off your shopping each week. If you work for a transport company, you're going to get free transport or reduced transport. So actually, I think it's very hard how you're going to actually, especially from a recruitment point of view, say to people, come and work for Medway because you're going to get extra this. That's really just more of a comment than a question.
Any other member? No? Okay. So move to the recommendations then, page 22 at 10.1. That we note the content of the report. Is that agreed? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so we move to agenda item 7, learning development policy. I'm going to ask Selina to introduce the report, please.
Thank you. My name's Selina Bullivant and I'm the Learning and Development Manager, and I'm presenting the Learning and Development Policy Document Refresh, which takes place every 3 years. The key changes within this document is the study leave form, which is found in Appendix 1, has been merged and condensed into the policy to provide clarity and a more concise document. We've requested Assistant Director approval on all spend requests, removing the head of service level. Addition of clear guidance for managers, volunteers and those undertaking work experience to outline when and if training opportunities can be supported. The addition of clear guidance outlining only essential training that is necessary for fulfilling the job criteria will be considered during a staff member's probationary period. The addition of climate change measures and how learning and development are supporting the climate change agenda. The formalisation of learning agreements, which is found in Appendix 3, which were previously issued at the request of a manager. It is proposed that learning agreements are issued to any staff member receiving an individual or combined qualification with the value of at least £2,000 or more. Should the employee fail to complete the training, or if they leave the council within 2 years of completing the course, the council will seek repayment of the funds. It is recognised that Medway Council will have benefited from the investment in the training, and is therefore proposed the repayment amount is in a sliding scale. 0 to 12 months at 100% repayment, 12 to 18 months 50%, and 18 to 24 months at 25%. Learning agreements can still be issued at the request of a manager for any qualification less than £2,000. I'm therefore asking the Employee Matters Committee to consider and approve the revised learning and development policy.
Thank you very much, Selina. Any member? Councillor Prenter?
I'm sorry, I'm sure it's in the report, but I've missed it. You said if the employee leaves within 2 years, they have to pay. Is that for any reason? I'm assuming if they're made redundant or ill health, they're not made to pay that back.
No, that's right. They wouldn't have to repay in those instances, only if they choose to resign or leave.
Lovely, thank you.
Councillor Thorne?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one about employees who become pregnant while they're doing their training. They take maternity leave halfway through their courses. Is there anything in there that allows for maternity, basically?
That's actually covered in our whole policy, and there will be a pause within their term of employment. So it will be as if there's a pause within that 2-year period as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other member? No, in which case, happy to remove the recommendations at 9.1 on page 27. Is that agreed? Great, thank you very much. With no further items on the agenda, that is the end of the meeting. Thank you all.